So
Cool.
welcome everybody. So I'm Timothy Harfield. I'm Senior Product Marketing Manager for Blackboard Analytics. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, Fostering Integrated A4L Report Adoption at Curtin University. So this is the latest in our ongoing series of community webinars, but it's the first time, the first to be held at a time that makes any reasonable sense for many outside of North America and Europe. And yet Australia in particular is really a hotbed of innovation in the learning analytics space. And so I'm thrilled to start what I hope will be a series that is more inclusive of our global clients and that provides us all the opportunity to learn from our entire community for Blackboard Analytics. So today we're joined by Eric Parkin. Eric is Data and Learning Analyst at Curtin Learning and Teaching. Curtin University has been using Blackboard Analytics for Learn since before 2016, which is when Eric joined. Since then, they've done exemplary work using, customizing, and building integrated reports. They've developed a strong community of practice around what they call analytics insights, and they've already seen significant improvements in process and performance as a result of the information that they are delivering. In this presentation, we're going to learn about how Curtin University has implemented Analytics for Learn, the custom reports they have created, the programs they have put in place to foster adoption, as well as plans for the future. So thank you so much for joining us today, Eric.
Cool. Thanks, Timothy. That's a really good introduction. So as Timothy said, can I call you Tim? Timothy?
Sure, Timothy.
So I'm here from Curtin University in Perth, where it's currently 8 a.m. So it's actually not too bad. It's early in the morning. So just briefly, I'm a data and learning analyst at Curtin University. One of my I'll just briefly go through what I'm going to talk about here. So overview first, I'll just give you a brief history of Blackboard Analytics here, what the team is working on, what our current focus is. I'll go through an overview of integrated reports, how we've designed them, what the common structure is, and then go through each individual report, which we have 5 currently: student background, unit activity, item activity, contribution and performance, and the student at a glance. I'll talk about how we're fostering adoption, and then some other ways that we're using Blackboard Analytics, not just for the integrated reports, even though that is our focus at the moment, and then talk about our future plans. So just, but please feel free to jump in if you have any questions as well. So for a bit of background, we adopted Blackboard Analytics at Curtin a number of years back. I'm not exactly sure when, maybe about 2013 or so. But it was mainly just the out-of-the-box solution, and it wasn't given any real focus until about mid-2016 when myself and Simon came on board. So at that time, Simon Huban, who's a more senior data scientist, and myself were assigned to Blackboard Analytics, and then I forgot to go through the slides. My apologies. Yes, made steady progress since then. What our team also does is we're not just focused on Blackboard Analytics. It's actually one of the projects we work on. So we also look at learning analytics across the university, such as hypothesis-driven retention analysis from the schools, things like pass rates and unit retention. Unit retention is probably our main focus because that's one of the strategic objectives of the university. So pulling together data from all sorts of different sources, our student information system, TISC, which is our high school application system, and a number of other sources, and we aim to provide a service to the different faculties and schools on hypothesis they have, basically, and answering those questions. So our focus on Blackboard Analytics is only really less than one full-time person. I'm the main person that sort of manages Blackboard Analytics here, but we do get assistance from Learning Technologies team who manages Blackboard Learn, and our Curtin IT team as well. So that's just a bit of context for the team. So given that our sort of limitations there, our focus has been on the integrated reports, where we feel as though that's where Blackboard Analytics offers the most value. We can sort of get the most bang for our buck with our sort of minimal resourcing. So an overview of those integrated reports. We created them, they were largely out of the box until 2016 when we ran a bunch of requirements gathering workshops with staff just to get an idea of the kind of things that they wanted to see. And once we were satisfied with our requirements, we met with a Blackboard Analytics consultant who was Nicole Wall at that time, and she helped us sort of come up with the rough design of these reports based on those requirements. And then we had a consulting project to really revamp those integrated reports to get them into a much more usable state. What we came up with was each report having a different theme, but sticking with the overall idea of having summary information at the top of each report and then having student level information at the bottom of the report. We have included a bunch of common filters in all of the reports, which is student availability, attendance mode and location, and then others that are just specific to each report. Particularly attendance mode and location was important to have on all of the reports, because here at Curtin we often run units within the same site but at different locations, and they're actually managed by different staff. So we got some feedback that without those filters, those unit coordinators wouldn't be able to use them. Oh, and just by the way, at Curtin we call our individual study programs units. I know a lot of other universities use the word courses, and that's what the language that's standard to Blackboard. So that's what I mean when I say units here. So it's the language we use here. And also recently, actually, a bit of history I should mention. Until this year, actually, we were using the Blackboard Learn model where we were recycling sites each semester. But now that we've moved on to archiving sites and using a different one each semester, it actually has really sort of enabled us to do a lot more with analytics. We can keep the reports from previous semesters, and it becomes a lot easier to manage. So that's also another reason that we've sort of improved recently. In each of the reports, we've tried to give just contextual information at the top that's just common to all of them: unit name, study period, number of enrollments, etc. And we've also tried to include tooltips and basic information on them. So our first report here is student background. This is probably, sorry, I keep forgetting to, click through the slides, thank you. Student background. This one is really not using too much of the detailed information from Blackboard Learn. It's more looking at information from our student information system, which for us is called Student One, made by a company called Technology One. Mainly because one of the biggest advantages for staff is simply having that information at their hands, because the only other way that staff can get a lot of this information is at an individual student level. They've got to go into our student information system. But having this information straight from their reports is probably the reason why it's the most used. So what we have here on this one is a few different summary pieces of information, say the academic year level, whether they're postgrad and undergraduate, and sort of the number of students from each group. Because the way we run our programs here, students can be studying a unit, but they're at a different point of progression through their course. So we use this academic year level based on the number of credits they've completed. We've included their average CWA, that's that number 65 there, which is their course weighted average. So you get an idea of the sort of average level of performance of your students. That's conditional students there. That's just the number of students who are on what we call conditional status, meaning they may have failed some units in the past, and so they potentially more at risk. And then number 79 is the number of students who have previously failed this unit. That's particularly high because I've chosen a very large unit here, but it sort of makes staff aware of students how many students are repeating it. This top courses and majors section, the next one down, is just a list of all of the, so when we say courses, we mean their degree, their sort of top level program of study. And also with our flexible programs we offer here, a single unit can be offered in many different programs. So this is just a breakdown of where they will come from. This has actually been one of the features that staff have found the most useful, is simply knowing the different courses that their students come from. And then we've got a couple other different breakdown: student citizenship, how many students have a disability, and that stuff, want to know that for equity reasons, etc. And at the bottom of this report, we've got all that information, and plus extra, but at each individual student level. So column by column, unit access, minutes, grade center score. That is information from Blackboard. We just want to include that basic summary. But then you've got basic some demographic information, age, gender, and then the course level study, course major, the academic year level, whether or not they're a high-performing student, how many failed attempts they have, etc. So that's sort of a really quick way for staff to get this information, and particularly that one there, failed attempts. That's quite important as well. Slide, yeah, slides. Sorry, I think. Let's go back. Slide 6. Oh, there's a slide missing on the presentation. Oh no, sorry, slide 6. Yes. Yeah, so that failed attempts is quite useful for staff because they can see anyone who might need extra help. Our next one is our unit activity report. I will go to. Who is the primary audience? This is a question from Timothy for the student background report and how do they access it? Well, the primary audience for all of these reports is the unit coordinator. So that's the person who's in charge of running that unit. They access it just the standard way through Blackboard. So we have, if you're the unit coordinator, you have access to the evaluation tab, and then you'll click on unit analytics, and then you'll see 4 main reports appear there. So that's how they see it. We do offer these reports only by default to unit coordinators, but other administrative staff in the faculties can see them as well if they're given access. Just because some of the information is a bit more sensitive, so we wanted to restrict. That's a good question. So the unit activity report, this one has got slightly different filters. So at the top there, this one allows you to select the particular week range that you were looking at for activity. So if you want to hone in on a particular week that you're interested in, you can filter that one. And this is the standard filters for availability, location, and attendance mode. At first, it's just got a basic summary of the number of visits to the site, the number of students who have accessed the site. So only 88% of students enrolled have actually accessed it. And then it's got some weekly stats for the unit. So it's comparing your students. We wanted to design this as a way for unit coordinators to see the level of activity of students in this site to those same students but from other sites. So that was this comparison graph here, where that pink line is the students' average number of accesses for each week, and the orange line is those same students' average number of accesses each week, but for their other units. And same for percentage to log in and interactions and minutes, etc. And then following the theme of the other ones, we've got the individual student level information at the bottom of the report, where it's got student by student, their total number of accesses, minutes, their grade center, which is useful for sorting, and their interactions. And then we've also got this weekly sort of heat map of accesses week by week. So this can sort of give an idea when students are active in the site. And it can also be sort of help to see when, if all of a sudden you see a lot of blue across on one line for a student, then all of a sudden it turns white. That might be an indicator, or they may have stopped engaging. Our next one, so that one looked at activity in the site as a whole. This one then looks at the activity for individual items. So instead of focusing on students, this one's a bit different by focusing on content. It's basically just a list of every content item in the site, every assessment, test, folder, etc., and basic stats about the number of times they've been accessed. So that first column there is the total number of students who have accessed it. Second one is the average number of accesses per student, and then the number of minutes, whether or not the item is available to staff, and then it's the first and last date that the item's been accessed. So this can give sort of an idea of if you've got any content that's particularly important, but you're seeing no one to access it, that might be a concern, that your students might not pass your test. That's sort of one of the use cases for this one. But then the next level is the drill down, where you can expand each of these content items, and then you'll see a list of each of the different students who have accessed that report. So then you can see how many times each student has accessed it and when they first and last accessed it. Could be an indicator of, if they only looked at something that's important for a test, the day before, and they don't do well, this might help discover that. Report 4 is our contribution and performance report. So this one, instead of focusing on activity, focuses more on grades and submissions. So as in what their grade center score is for each of the different assessment items, and then what they're submitting to the site. So not what their activity is, but what they're actually contributing. And it's got a bunch of different elements on this report. It's sort of a bit jam-packed. That first one is the scatter plot, which I think was standard in the out-of-the-box ones, but we've added this is from an idea from, I think Nicole helped us come up with this one, where it's color-coded, so each dot being a student which you can drill through to, but color-coded based on an indicator of whether or not they're at risk of, say, performing poorly in the site, which I'll explain that on the next slide. It's got some basic stats about what the highest score for any student is overall, the average score, and this correlation. Sorry, I should explain. On the x-axis there, you have an activity measure, which is, in this case, interactions. And then on the y-axis, you have the grade center score, just so you can get that correlation. Then underneath that, you have assessment statistics. So for each of the grade center items, just a simple, how many points is that assessment worth? The minimum and maximum score that anyone has achieved for that assessment, and the average score, whether or not the item is visible. Pretty simple. It's very similar to what's in the grade center score, but just gives you a sort of summary. And then this chart on the right is a sort of week by week picture of what students are submitting and the item types. So for this particular unit, I think that color there represents Turnitin. So you can see in week 6 or so, it's a huge spike. So obviously when an assessment was due for this unit, and that's why you can see that. But this sort of can be good to see what the overall workload is for students in your unit. Okay, so that's those two sections. And then we come to the bottom of the report. This is where you have your individual student details. So same before, you've got the grade center score. We've also included a bunch of different performance measures on this one to get an idea of, staff find any students who might be struggling or might need, just to be looked after. So that first one there is failed attempts from that you also saw on the student background report. This one was actually kind of difficult for us to transform. We had to sort of manage the data from our student information system up with that number. It's got their academic standing, and it's got whether or not they're a high performing student, which is just a simple measure of what their current course weighted average is, and whether or not they're on conditional status. And this performance alert column here with these color-coded dots, that is the same thing that appeared on, if I go back a couple of slides, the chart here, so that those colors will match. And it basically is just a count of those other columns. So it's looking at whether or not their grade center score is in the bottom quartile for students. So if they're sort of in the bottom quartile performers, if they failed the unit before, that gives them another point. And then if they're on conditional status, then that gives them another point. And so that's where you'll see the yellow, orange, and red as a way to sort of make it clearly visible who might be struggling. And that's why you see if I go back to the chart, everyone below a certain point will be automatically yellow, just because their grade center score is obviously going to be in the bottom quartile if they're at the bottom of that chart. covers our 4 main reports. These ones are all available directly from that menu. We also have the Student at a Glance report, which is the 5th one, which can be drilled through from any of those other 4. We have only enabled this one at this point for staff to see. We haven't enabled any student-facing report yet, just because we're still working through what the best kind of information to share is. So this one is only for staff. And now our thinking for this one was we want to give staff a picture of each student with most of the information you could find in the other 4 reports, but sort of in the one place. So that if they're looking at it, if they're concerned about a particular student, they can go here and they can see it all sort of in one place much easier. So as before, it's got their basic student background information, the course they're from, etc. It's got one extra feature here, which is their unit enrollment. So it's looking at any other site that the student is enrolled in for the same study period. And it sort of can give unit coordinators an idea of their workload. Are they only doing my unit, or how many other units are they also doing? Which is something that they can't get easily anywhere else unless they go to our student information system and download a academic or a progress report, as it's called. So that's one way they can quickly get that information, is to another system. The unit activity, so this is just some basic summaries of where the student's activity is in the unit compared to the other students in the unit. So pink being this student, black being the other student, so you just have an idea of what their engagement is compared to everyone else. Further down from that, on the same report, we have the equivalence of that item activity report, and it's showing you what the top 5 most accessed items are, which is you can drill through by clicking on that link there, and then it's got another one which is just a list of everyone, every item they have clicked through. The real benefit of this is on the next slide, which will show you, which you drill down on. But before that, you have just this grade center information, as in their assessment scores. What was the maximum score possible? What did the lowest student achieve? What did the highest student achieve? And what did this student achieve? Just a quick way to see how the student is performing compared to the others in the unit. And then, so those 2 blue links there under those top 5 item accessed and first 5 items accessed is clickable, and that just goes through to the next page of the report, which is on here. These are on the next 2 pages. What is the value of seeing the first items accessed? Well, it's not so much seeing the first items accessed that has value. It's really this drill through section that's important, where it's got the log of everything. It's just sort of a way to shortcut it. So like when you see there, first 5 items accessed, unit information, unit resources, that may be interesting to unit coordinators, but it's really clicking on there, see unit items accessed by date, where it's got the real value, where you might want to see when students first access particular items and that sort of thing. So this left half here is just like the item activity report I showed earlier, but it's just got everything this student has accessed. And that right one, as I said, is just an activity log. So it's like what was their date and time of their access, and what items did they click on when they entered the site there. So if you're looking at, say, student appeals, if they're appealing an assessment mark or something, and they say, look, I accessed this, I've been active in the site, you can use this kind of to verify what they're saying. Oh, good. Yeah, that activity log is quite useful for if you ever want to drill down onto what a student sees. So that covers the reports we have on offer right now. We are considering doing another one, which is the student-facing report, which I believe there is room to do that one, but that is longer term, probably not next year or maybe even later. We've got a professor of psychology here who studies learning analytics, so he's doing sort of research on what the best kind of information students should see and what confuses them. So we're sort of working through that process to figure out what is best to show students, because until we have that sort of solid information, we don't want to show anything that potentially put students off. So move to, oops, I think I jumped 2 slides ahead. Challenges. So what are our biggest challenges right now? So report performance is the biggest issue, and Jason, who is in this session, is helping us work on this. So we're at a point now where staff are starting to use the reports, but they're finding interest in them. But when they click on them, they're taking a long time to load, and it's turning them off, and it's kind of intermittent. So it's sort of a technical problem that's probably our biggest issue at the moment, and partly could be due to the complexity of the report and a number of other factors. So that's what we're going to be working through. The staging table will be quite challenging as well. So because we use one of a student information system, which is not like supported directly by Blackboard, we've had to sort of transform it all ourselves. And I think the standard sort of language that Blackboard uses is different to what we use here in Australia. So I had to sort of try to figure out how those get translated. That took a lot of time to get pretty good, but still I'm working on that one. That's improving, but that was very important as well to get that consistency between student information system and Blackboard Analytics, so that staff know what they're seeing. Understanding the data is always an issue with staff as well. So just helping them understand what interactions are, what they're looking at, what does it all mean, and what do they do with it. That's also one of the biggest challenges. And also coming up with little data issues that also turn people off. So some of it results from the analytics system, some of it results from the staging table, but working through those issues one by one. We're slowly getting on top of them now, but we want to do more automated testing. That's also one of the issues we have. Fostering adoption. So now we've got reports that we were happy with sort of showing more broadly after we'd worked through the bulk of the problems. How do we get staff to actually use them when they're all busy? So we've done a number of different things, but mainly we've tried to keep it as much of a self-service model as possible, just because we don't really have the staff dedicated to support them at a detailed level. So everything we do is trying to move it towards a situation where staff understand the reports themselves and can support it and support each other. So we've done this a few different ways. The first, most basic way is just including just little informational text on the reports themselves that people often have questions about, say, what is an interaction, what is a unit access? It's the immediate questions people have. We wanted them to be able to answer that question straight on the reports, so we included that on the reports where it appears. Communications. So we've been sending out a series of emails to all unit coordinators suggesting simple ways that they can use the reports. Say, for example, at the start of the semester, we just say, now that students have enrolled, we suggest you look into the student background report and have a look at what courses your students are from, where are they coming from, as a way to judge whether or not your students have the required background information on the content. So we send those out every few weeks during semester. Our semester 2 is just starting next week, so we'll be doing them again. We have set up a wiki site, which is much better than just a website for our purposes, because a regular web page, because we can quickly edit it. It links straight from that help button at the top of the report. It's got information like simple how-tos, definitions of data. This has got all the detailed information. It's got FAQs that we get a lot, a log of known issues, so people are aware of them. Feature requests, so anything that we often get asked, oh, can you add this, can you add that? This would be great. We've got a page for that, and as well as any of the pending enhancements. And we've also included the communications I mentioned earlier. We've included that on the wiki site, just so that people can go back into them and see, oh, what was the suggestion for this week, without having to go back through their emails. And we've just included extra resources, that kind of thing as well. Workshops. So workshops are quite helpful, not for giving that, what we found is it's best not for giving that kind of detailed information because it's too much to absorb at once. But often when, say, one of the schools here contacts us and says, oh, we want our staff to be using these reports more, can you come and do a session? Mainly it's they haven't actually even looked at them at all yet, even though we're sending out these communications and everything. But once they're in the workshop and we show them, a quick presentation, what they can do, they get interested immediately and start poking around in their own system. So that's sort of where they come in most useful, is just generating that appetite, saying, oh, this is interesting, I didn't know you could do this. Whereas if it's just an email, they didn't really sort of always look at it because they get bombarded with so many emails. So that's what we've found works best, rather than the detailed what to do with it. It's just making them aware of it really helps. We try to monitor how we're going for this adoption of analytics on a few different ways. So the other, Jason actually built these for us, these analytics on analytics reports, which are accessible via SSRS, which is the reports available outside of Blackboard Analytics, outside of Blackboard, sorry, where we can sort of monitor. What we do is very simple. We look at what are the number of unique sites that have at least once clicked on the reports, and then we can see over the semester how many of them have clicked on it, and we sort of slowly start to see an uptick as we go. So that's how we're monitoring it. And we also, when we send out those email communications, we just put a little tracking email on it, so where we can count how many times we've actually clicked through to go to that wiki page or wherever we've linked through. And every now and then we report on what the adoption rate is. And so far so good, sort of a steady increase. But it remains to be seen if it will keep using it or whether it drops off for the second semester if they haven't found it useful, but we'll find out in good time. Other ways that we are using Blackboard Analytics. So as I said, the main way we use Blackboard Analytics is in those integrated reports. But we do use some of the other features as well. So Pyramid, we've decided not to make this available broadly to staff just because it's very easy to misinterpret the data and requires sort of its barrier to entry is very high. So, but we do use it, but limited to the data analytics team, being Simon and myself, and our learning technologies team here that uses that manages the Blackboard Learn system. We sometimes use it just to build ad hoc reports that we get. Say someone wants to know enrollment numbers for the university, things like that. But we've limited it to that kind of thing. SSRS we're using really only for those analytics on analytics reports. Again, because it's sort of an extra step that staff would have to create an account to be able to get access to SSRS, and we haven't put the focus on designing these reports to be user-friendly. Research analytics is useful when it's only sort of really myself and Simon that look at them, but they're still quite useful for that purpose. So a question from Christopher there. Have I created any custom reports or customized reports that you've extended to constituents via the LMS? Does that mean, so the integrated reports that we have, they are the customized ones, but we haven't done any. Once or twice we created some custom pyramid reports that we sent out to a couple of different areas where they're interested in some research questions. Yes, we have done that, but that's sort of exception, like it's only happened a couple of times. Is that what you're asking? Hope that answers the question. So actually, one example of that is we had one staff member interested in. She was doing research on how female students in the engineering programs engaging compared to the male students, and so we were able to give that information, whereas if she was only to use the integrated reports as at an individual unit level, so with Pyramid we were able to give it across a bunch of different units. So that was probably the main advantage there. So yeah, occasionally we get some customized reports that we send out, but we don't like to advertise that we do that. SSRS, analytics, yes. So the other main area that we're using Blackboard Analytics for is by accessing the data warehouse directly. So we're doing this more and more because we're seeing this as where the most value is in the future. So we mainly use Python here. So we sort of connect to the database using our credentials, and we set up Jupyter notebooks because we're sort of data sciencey people, so we like doing that. To download it and combine it and use it with other university data. This is kind of sort of experimental at this point because it takes a lot of transformation to get it right. But the one thing we have sort of put into production and are regularly doing is what we call this risk list data set, which is just a simple list of every student and how long it's been since they last accessed a site or any of their sites, which we then send out to the faculties. And prior to our census date here, which is the last date that students can withdraw, they send like a message out to the students saying, with informational help, are you aware that you're enrolled? You've never logged into Blackboard. Do you need any extra help? They can point them to different places, because if they wait any longer, then they'll have to pay fees. So a couple of different areas have appreciated that, and that is better than using the integrated reports for that purpose, because we can generate it for everyone. We don't have to go unit by unit. So that's a number of areas have found that quite valuable, and we're going to continue doing that. Yes, so that's currently how we're using Blackboard Analytics other than the integrated reports. So future plans. From our experience using Blackboard Analytics so far, its main value is in two areas. It's in that, first of all, is in that data analytics warehouse where it's all been pre-transformed, and we can see quite easily some stats without having to go into the raw data to get the information. It would be impractical and costly for us to create this ourselves from the Blackboard Learn database. So this is something that's really at the core value that I see of Blackboard Analytics, is just the actual data itself. The other main value for us at the moment is that for delivering those unit level reports. So without Blackboard Analytics, we may be able to use the data from the warehouse and build our own reports, but actually getting it out there to unit coordinators, in a way they can access readily without having to go to another place, would be quite difficult for us. But with Blackboard Analytics, they are already available, and all we have to do is work on the reports. So it's the low barrier to entry that makes it quite good. Unlike some BI tools where we've got here, where you've got to sort of log into a separate system, harder to use, etc. That's where the value is. However, it does have its limitations, because anytime we want to customize the reports, we have to go to our Blackboard consultants, who are very good. Jason's here. He's one of our ones that does our work for us. But it means that we can't be very responsive. So if we have to go to our consultant every time to customize something, it sort of it's a bit of a barrier if we want to present reports to staff that are more responsive and can answer questions they have immediately. So our long-term plans, and this is quite long, we don't know how long this will take, is to utilize data in the data warehouse more. As we use it more, we're gaining better of understanding this, to build our own dashboards and come up with another way of delivering reports to staff that don't rely on the SSRS and don't require someone like Jason customized with SSRS or Pyramid. We would find another way to deliver them. Something like, we thought for a while about whether or not it would be possible to use something like Tableau, where we could pull the data from the warehouse and then we could do our own visualizations in Tableau and push them out to staff. but we might not be able to do that because it could be quite costly. So we're considering some other alternatives, open source options, etc., where we would do that. Yes, and it would sort of give us that more control over the data. But that will take a long time, and the main challenge for that will be coming up with that delivery mechanism where staff can access it, within Learn without having to go anywhere else. And that'll be a long time. So until then, we need to keep using the integrated reports, and Jason's helping us make them as good as possible until we can sort of migrate to something where we can be more flexible. Thank you for that. Any questions? That basically covers what I wanted to talk about. Nope. Any comments?
So, yeah, so I have to echo what Chris just wrote in the chat. This is really excellent work, and I think you got us all thinking. Some of this stuff I've not seen or necessarily thought of before, which is really neat. So you presented us, I think, with some just really excellent ideas, and your tips for adoption are just spot on. And I know that is a real issue for a lot of people, because you can expose data all day long, but how do you you can lead the horse to water, right? But how do you get them to drink?
Yeah,
it's a huge challenge.
Exactly.
And so you are really thinking through analytics in a very holistic way, from visualization through to adoption, but in a way that also is sensitive to resourcing, right?
Yep. I'll make them understand what water is. I don't quite understand that comment.
Chris, do you want to explain? Do you have access to a mic?
You have me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello? Sorry, I don't have the best internet connection right now. No, my comment was more just I'm facing some of the same things, and that's just in the user's understanding of what they're seeing, and trying to get them to adopt it when the information is in almost a status of information overload. It's exactly what they need, but they know why they need it, but understanding how to take action on something that, from a data science perspective, or from an analytical perspective, you sit there and you look at it and you go, oh my gosh, this is actionable data. But to take the instructor and the faculty member, the teacher, and turn them into the person that has to take action on it, they're not, and this is something that I've found is that they're not necessarily equipped for that level of analytical reasoning, or they didn't grow up with it, or they didn't, they haven't kind of reached that level yet where it's like, I've seen this metric, I understand what that means, and that means I need to do X. And so for us, it's almost how do we teach them how to teach again, with data. And
yeah, so that's also
one
of the problems. It's also about unit coordinators, the teaching staff's their time. So they look at these reports, see it's too much information, I don't know what to do with this. That's where the communications that we send out have been targeted to try to help. So what we're doing there is, so for example, one of them that we send out is just on disengaged students. So it says, it's basically just a quick step, a couple of steps that you have to do to get something valuable. So it says briefly what that unit activity report is, and then it says step 1, have a look at engagement. What percentage of students have engaged, just on that, some at the top. And then find those disengaged students. So I'll go back to that screenshot actually, the item activity report. Sorry, unit activity. Yes, and then so here just sort on that number of interactions, and then look for anyone who's got a 0 or got almost nothing. So it's just we just give them very simple use cases of ways to use the reports rather than just bombarding them with information. We're not sure how effective that is yet, but it's our way of trying to make it more accessible and getting them getting them a reason to actually go in and use it. But we do also have the problem that staff get spammed with a lot of emails and information, and often they don't really see it. They just see, oh, it's just another email from Curtin Learning and Teaching, and they just sort of archive it. But that's where those workshops help as well. That if they come to a workshop and they see us actually show them the report, we just show it to them, then they say, oh, that's what that's all about, and then they're more likely to read it next time. So that's kind of been our approach to trying to get them, try to help them understand what the water is, I suppose.
Do you find that some courses, and I think I'm using it in the way that you're using it, some courses are using Analytics for Learn, these reports, more than others?
Yes, definitely. So when we do our analytics on analytics, we do it by faculty as well, or teaching area. And one of the area that stands out that uses it the most is what we call our OUA programs, which is in Open Universities Australia. So these are all run online. They're sort of Curtin units, but run through another program. And they don't have any face-to-face classes. And so we're finding that we've never really engaged specifically with this group, but their level of use of the reports is a lot higher than everyone else in comparison. That's probably just due to the fact that they don't get to see their students face-to-face, so they want to know who they are, and that's my guess as to why that is. That's probably the area we see the most significant difference.
And then I always want to ask questions about impact. So for the amount of time that you've made these reports available, have you seen any measurable impact in terms of the kinds of behaviors that you're looking to drive?
It's hard. I think it's hard to judge that. The main thing that we look for is that people are actually using them and are aware of them, and that's definitely increased. Trying to get people to actually look at the data, and trying to embed this data-driven approach into the faculties is seeing some success where we're starting to see areas come to us for data instead of us trying to push it out and get them to use it. That's the way I kind of judge it. For example, getting that data out of analytics in those risk lists that I said, where we look at students who haven't engaged, that's something that is having a sort of broad impact because it's being sent out to all students. And in our faculty of business and law here, where they're probably the most proactive in using that information, they did try to measure the information that had on students. So they had got that list, and they had come up with they used a program called Campaign Monitor to look at the information they send out and the click-throughs that it gets and so on. And then afterwards, we gave them the data again to see now how many students had not logged in. And they did see a significant drop in the number of students who hadn't ever logged in. So it looks like it had some impact, but again, you've got to be careful because maybe at that week they all would have logged in anyway. But it is early indicators that it's making some kind of difference. Yeah.
And you say that you're also working with a faculty member. Can you say who that is who's working in the learning analytics space in your psychology department?
Yes, I can. I'm sure he won't mind me mentioning him. So his name is Joel Howe. His focus is on learning analytics. So he does a lot of research on basically. I think he's done a lot of research on how students see students can best use content, how they understand the data that you show them. So he's run like questionnaires and so on with staff, and he's published a few things. That's who that is. And he teaches one of our units here as well.
Yeah, so has he been using this data in his research, and has he informed any of the work that you've been doing along with Simon?
Yes, actually. So he helped us with some of the guides that we made, because from our point of view, we're not unit coordinators. We're not, so that way inclined. We come at it from a more technical point of view. But he helped us create a sort of a quick start guide that we've put up on the wiki, which is his idea of how he would expect people to use them. So for each report, he's gone and said, okay, what will I likely use? And I'm just going through it now. Say student background. And then he's pointed to, say, the summary information. Look at this percentage of students who have not accessed the unit. Unit activity over time, that kind of thing. So we've also met with him and a few other ones that we've asked to sort of use the reports over the semester to give some feedback, and they are starting to use it. Mainly, we see it's that first report and just getting the basic information like what course and major the students are enrolled in is what people find the most useful. Does that answer your question?
It absolutely is, and that kind of guide, it sounds like that's been really important for adoption as well, right? Closing that loop between information and taking action in a sense.
Well, I'm not sure actually. I don't know how many people. I have not been able to track how many people are actually looking at this guide. But we've kept to make sure that people open it. We've kept the basics of how to access the reports in that guide, so that they see, oh, how do I access the report? And then we say, I'll click on the quick start guide, and then they see it and go through. Can't really judge how effective that's been though, because we don't have any data on it.
Any other
more questions?
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Eric. Like I say, this is really exciting work. I think you got us thinking. You certainly have me thinking about different ways of visualizing information, the kind of information that might be useful in this context. And I think that everything that you've shown here is applicable across everywhere in the world. So globally, globally applicable, even at 8 a.m. in the morning. So thank you for waking up a little bit early, showing this to us. For everyone on the call, this will be made available. We've recorded it. It'll be made available via the community site. Speaking of the community site, if you're not actively engaged already, please join community.blackboard.com/groups/analytics. Also, if you are in Australia, New Zealand, join us for TLC ANZ in Brisbane. That's August 28th to 31. In addition to some excellent analytics presentations, we're also going to have a user group meeting. Regardless of whether you can attend in person or not, there will be a remote participation option. So definitely join us either in person or online for that. Details about that can be found by the community site. And lastly, if you have an innovation or a high impact practice similar to what Eric presented to us today, I'd like to share that with the community and help you to share that with our community so that those impact practices can be shared, scaled, and make an impact more broadly. So drop me a line at timothy.harfield@blackboard.com or follow me on Twitter at Timothy Harfield. Once again, thank you so very much, Eric. This is wonderful. We look forward to watching you as you continue to progress in your analytics journey.
No worries. Thanks everyone for coming along.